Headlines. The two Koreas hold rare sports talks Thursday to discuss North Korea sending its athletes and cheering squad to the upcoming Incheon Asian Games, but nothing fruitful came out with no date set for the next round. Political parties kick off official campaigns for the July 30th by-elections. 15 seats are up for grabs, the largest ever number for a by-election. And Israel and Hamas agree to cease fire temporarily. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. I'm Kang Tae-ri in Seoul. The two Koreas held working-level talks on this Thursday to discuss the details of North Korea's participation in the upcoming Asian Games in South Korea, but it ended without agreement and no date set for their next meeting. Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
Hours of talks did not lead the Koreas anywhere on Thursday, with no concrete agreement on North Korea's participation in the upcoming Asian Games in South Korea. At the center of discussions were the transportation and accommodations of the North Korean delegation at the Games and how their expenses will be covered. Also in question was the number of cheerleaders North Korea plans to bring across the border. An official at South Korea's Unification Ministry said the North Korean delegation will be able to travel directly to Incheon, just like any other team participating in the sporting event. It would mark the first arrival of a North Korean plane or ferry in the South since 2010, when heavy sanctions were imposed following a North Korean attack on a South Korean warship. Pyongyang may also have proposed forming a joint cheering squad and creating united teams for certain events. So far, Seoul has not been keen on the idea. But some experts say the Asian Games could become a platform for Pyongyang to show its sincerity.
So if it works, I think they'll be able to say, well, see, we meant what we said, and let's try something else. Let's have a second step on this. Maybe it will change perceptions in the South enough so that a second step will be easier.
Although no dates for additional rounds of talks have been set, the two sides are expected to meet again before the Incheon Asian Games begin on September 19th. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
If Japan ends up further relaxing unilateral sanctions on North Korea, Seoul would like to be consulted beforehand. A high-ranking South Korean official told reporters in Tokyo that Japan needs to see the big picture and know that independent actions could affect the international community's ability to curb North Korea's nuclear program. The official said Tokyo should also keep Washington in the loop about discussions it's having with Pyongyang. Japan recently eased some of its restrictions on humanitarian exchanges with North Korea after Pyongyang reopened an investigation into Japanese nationals abducted by North Korea in the 70s and 80s. The first ever Hollywood film on the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has been receiving more than enough attention, I would say, thanks to protests by the communist state. Shin Se-min has the details. The Interview, a film on a CIA mission to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, is set to be released in October. But the trailer alone has been enough to stir up controversy, first given that it's the first ever Hollywood movie that depicts the young North Korean leader. Seth Rogen, who also co-produced and co-directed the film, tweeted last month that he hopes Kim Jong-un watches the movie and enjoys it. And of course, North Korea is not happy with this film. It called the film as a wanton act of terror and warned the U.S. of a merciless response if the movie is released. North Korea also appealed its complaint to the United Nations. North Korea's ambassador to the UN sent a letter to the UN Secretary General saying the film is an act of war and calls the two directors as terrorists. Now, Rogen, seemingly enjoying the responses his movie has engendered out of Pyongyang, later tweeted again, this time joking that people normally don't want to kill him until after they've paid $12 to see one of his films. And in the latest development, Pyongyang has sent a letter of protest over the movie, this time to the White House. Voice of America reports that the North asked White House National Security Council to review the letter, which said it could not comment on the movie. Now, at this point, there are no signs that Columbia Pictures, the distributor of the interview, has any plan to shelve this film. While they haven't commented on the threats out of Pyongyang, they no doubt are enjoying the free publicity the North is providing them. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
China has released its 14th set of confessions from Japanese war criminals in its attempt to raise international awareness of Japan's wartime atrocities amid its disputes with Tokyo over history and territory. The Chinese government is publishing the confessions every day for 45 days. Kim Hyun-bin has the details on the latest release.
In the latest war criminal confession to be released by China, Geishi Shimioka, an officer of Japanese Imperial Army, admits that troops under his control used to engage in human target practice. He says that, at the time, it was his unit's policy was to build up soldiers' courage by letting them shoot at Chinese prisoners of war. In July 1942, in Taiwan City, 220 POWs were used as live targets, and each Japanese cadet was ordered to kill POW.
In another instance, 340 new recruits killed 340 prisoners of war.
On top of this, Japanese troops used germ warfare on villages spreading typhoid and cholera to the residents. They also raped hundreds of women and executed them after, in an attempt to hide evidence.
After a young woman was raped, lower-ranked troops were often ordered to rape the woman's mother.
Geishi also confessed to personally killing numerous civilians and POWs using a traditional sword carried by Japanese officers. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Turning now to some tragic news out of the southern city of Gwangju in Korea, where a firefighting helicopter crashed this Thursday morning, killing all 5 people on board. The chopper was returning from search operations at the site of April's ferry disaster when it went down in a residential area of the city. A high school student nearby the crash site was also injured and taken to a hospital. Authorities are investigating the cause of this incident, but a military official was quoted as saying that the helicopter lost altitude quickly before crashing. The race is on. Campaigning for the July 30th by-elections officially began this Thursday, and the stakes are high, with 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs. It's the largest and perhaps one of the most important by-election in Korea's history. Ji Myung-gil reports.
For the next 13 days, 55 candidates will be on the campaign trail, battling it out for the 15 vacant parliamentary seats that are up for grabs in the July 30th by-elections. 6 of the 15 seats are located in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province. 2 are in the Gyeongsang-do provinces, 4 in the Jeollado provinces, while the remaining 3 are in the Chungcheong-do provinces. The ruling Saenuri Party is vying to secure a majority of parliamentary seats through the by-elections, fielding candidates in all 15 races. Seoul's Dongjak-bi district is considered strategically important to both rival parties, as it's the only vacant assembly seat in Seoul.
If given the chance, I will use the lessons I've learned from running the Dongjak-gu district and make sure the National Assembly is working toward improving the livelihoods of the people.
With no clear winner in last month's local elections, main opposition party candidate Ki Dong-min emphasized the importance of victory.
The new Political Alliance for Democracy must win in all 15 districts, including Seoul's Dongjak-bi constituency, to make a statement against the Park Geun-hye administration's arrogance and stubbornness.
During the campaign period, the Saenuri Party is expected to distance itself from President Park Geun-hye and put more of an emphasis on the candidate's capabilities. The main opposition party will focus on the government's mishandling of April's ferry tragedy and present alternatives to the ruling party's policies. 지명길, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korean policymakers have been drawing up measures to pull the country out of a low-growth trap since the new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-won recently ordered them to explore all possible means to stimulate the Korean economy. And that could include putting their hands on public funds as well. Song Ji-sun has the details.
The government has rolled out a supplementary budget this year, but is determined to utilize all available state-run funds to stimulate the economy. Unnamed government officials told reporters that some 10 trillion won, or around $10 billion will be injected into the economy from public funds this year. Details have yet to be released, but officials say the National Housing Fund, which accounts for 9% of some $500 billion of funds run by the government this year, will play a major role in bolstering the real estate market. As a way to generate more construction activity, the government will also guarantee greater profits to companies taking part in infrastructure projects. To press companies to avoid hoarding excess cash and to increase investments, the government is considering levying taxes for cash reserves exceeding a certain limit. The government, on the other hand, says it will grant tax breaks and other incentives to companies going public or offering higher dividends. A comprehensive policy package designed to stimulate domestic demand will be released next week. Song Ji-sun, 아리랑 뉴스.
The Korean won is gaining strength and using its muscle against small and mid-sized exporters here in Korea who are starting to feel the pinch. The currency appreciated by the biggest margin against the greenback among G20 countries over the past 3 months. Yoo-Yeon reports.
The Korean won rose 5.2% against the US dollar in the second quarter of this year. That's the biggest jump out of all G20 member countries, according to the Bank of Korea, ahead of Canada, Russia, and Britain. The currency's rise has been attributed to 27 straight months of an current account surplus and a rush of foreign investment into Korean stocks and bonds. Expectations that the European Central Bank's rate cuts could propel more foreign capital into Asia's fourth largest economy have also had an effect. But export companies are hurting, as a stronger won makes Korean-made exports significantly more expensive for overseas buyers. In a recent survey conducted by the Korea Federation of Small and Medium Business, 9 out of 10 small to medium-sized export companies said the currency fluctuations were affecting their profitability. The situation is only likely to worsen down the road. The companies worry that the exchange rate may fall below what they see as a break-even point of 1,057 won. But economists say the exchange rate may fall even lower.
When the U.S. tapering ends in October, the won may begin to weaken against the dollar, but the upward pressure still far outweighs the downward pressure on the won because of the continued current account surplus and abundance in foreign exchange holdings. The currency may fall even below the 1,000 mark by the end of the year.
Kim says the government needs to intervene in the currency market before the export companies are forced to scale down their outbound shipments. Yoo-Yeon, 아리랑 뉴스.
The U.S. economy is expanding at a modest and moderate pace. That's according to the U.S. Federal Reserve's monthly report released Wednesday. It said all regions of the United States continued to expand their economic activity in the 6-week period that ended on July 7th, and added that consumer spending and manufacturing are also up. Wall Street responded positively to the news, with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ closing higher. The Dow Jones also rose nearly 0.5% higher to close at its second record-high close this month. And buoyed by the gains overseas, the Korean benchmark Kospi rose 0.37% on Thursday to close at a yearly high of just under 2,021 points. Korea's producer prices rose in June on year for the first time in nearly 2 years as farm products gained ground. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that producer prices inched up 0.1% last month and attributed the bump to livestock products, which have seen increases for 10 straight months. From a year earlier, livestock products shot up more than 16% in June. President Park Geun-hye and her science and technology advisors gathered on this Thursday to talk about specific plans to create new growth engines that will create more jobs. The proposed measures are expected to help the government tackle global issues such as aging societies and climate change. Our Cheo-san has more.
President Park's science and technology advisors pledged to make Korea one of the world's top 7 biotechnology nations by 2020 by fostering 50 globally competitive biofirms and launching 10 new types of medicine. To achieve this, the Advisory Council first proposed turning Korea into the world's largest biosimilar medicine producer by 2016, especially as more than a dozen innovative drugs overseas are close to their patent expiration. The council also talked about investing more in commercializing stem cell and gene therapy treatments and utilizing Korea's advanced IT capabilities to develop state-of-the-art medical equipment. Because of the aging global population and growing health concerns, the advisors expect there to be rising demand for bio-related industries over the next 20 years. As more and more countries look towards eco-friendly energy sources in tackling climate change, the Science Ministry vowed to expand R&D investments into related technologies such as solar and fuel cells and bioenergy to $2 billion by 2020. And the Land Ministry suggested easing regulations and offering tax support to boost construction of self-sufficient zero-energy buildings that minimize energy usage through insulation. At Thursday's meeting, President Park said both the bio and renewable energy areas contribute to improving quality of life and opening an era of national happiness. She then urged the government and the private sector to work together to create a self-sustainable industrial ecosystem. 최유선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korea is likely to surpass Thailand as the #1 travel destination for Chinese tourists this year. According to a study by a Chinese travel agency, the number of Chinese visitors to Korea has jumped more than 40% so far this year, and it's a trend that's expected to continue. Data by the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute shows that nearly 1.6 million Chinese tourists visited Korea from January to April, up 49% from the same period a year earlier. The study attributes this rise to the popularity of Korean pop music and dramas in China and eased visa regulations. More than 4.3 million Chinese tourists visited Korea last year. Korea has experienced rapid growth over the past few decades and is doing pretty well when it comes to things like exports, cutting-edge technology, and the like. But economic development doesn't seem to match up to the country's level of happiness. A survey conducted by Ipsos Mori, a leading market research company in the UK, found that just 64% of Koreans said they were happy. This placed Korea 19th out of 20 countries surveyed, being only second to the last. Spain was the least happy country, while Sweden topped the list. A temporary ceasefire between Israeli defense forces and the militant group Hamas has begun following the deaths of 4 Palestinian children in Gaza City. And for more on this story, of course, our Paul E. is joining us from the News Center. Paul, what are the conditions of this truce?
Well, Israel was the first to accept the United Nations request for the temporary ceasefire, which went into effect at 10 a.m. local time and will last until 3 p.m. And now, just in breaking news, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a new ceasefire. This as Israeli security forces say at least 2 rockets have been fired into Israel as of 10 a.m. The ceasefire was proposed on humanitarian grounds to give UN staff a 5-hour window to transport food and medical supplies into heavily damaged areas in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's military says it's investigating the death of 4 young children who witnesses say were struck down by Israeli naval fire. 7 others were also reportedly caught in the bombardment near a beach in Gaza City. Despite the truce, the Israeli military has warned civilians living in northern and western Gaza to evacuate ahead of a possible ground assault.
The army's goal is to deal Hamas a blow such that when its leaders evaluate the damage that has been done, they will understand it was a mistake to attack Israel. We will continue to act with determination and aggression until quiet returns to Israel. We won't tolerate the disruption of Israeli life.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army has released footage that it says shows a foiled attack by gunmen who were tunneling into Israel from Gaza. A military source said that Israeli forces repelled at least a dozen Hamas gunmen, adding there were several Palestinian casualties. The operation occurred just hours before the first truce took effect early Thursday.
I see. Now, turning now to Afghanistan, Paul. Government security forces there have repelled a full frontal assault on Kabul International Airport by heavily armed militants. What's the latest status on the airport?
Well, police say they've neutralized the threat. The surrounding perimeter remains under lockdown, and all flights are still being diverted to other nearby airports over fears of further attacks. There has been no immediate claim of responsibility for the assault on the main airport in the Afghan capital city, but police said the tactics used were similar to an attack by the Taliban last year. The militants, armed with automatic rifles and rocket-propelled grenades, opened fire from a roof in the early morning hours on Thursday. The fierce gun battle between Afghan forces and the insurgents lasted for some 4 hours before it ended without any civilian deaths.
4 attackers were killed without any casualties to our forces. 2 RPG, 1 machine gun, and 2 AK-47s were left in the area from the attackers. The operation ended successfully. Thank God there were no casualties to civilian and military forces.
Kabul's airport has come under fire from militant rocket attacks and suicide bombings for weeks. It's also a major operational base for NATO-led forces that have been fighting the Taliban and other insurgents over the last decade.
Now, moving now to the United States, the Coast Guard there has launched a rescue operation to save over 100 people stranded on a passenger vessel off the southern coast of Georgia. What's the latest on the passengers and the crew?
That's good news. Coast Guard officials say all 123 people on board the casino boat have been rescued and are on shore as of late Wednesday. However, investigators are still trying to determine what caused the ship to stall during its maiden voyage. Crew members said the 53-meter-long escapade was en route to the beach destination east of Savannah before it ran aground 3 kilometers near Tybee Island. Boats and helicopters were dispatched to help the 94 passengers who were stranded for nearly 24 hours on the ship. 1 passenger was taken to a nearby hospital as a precaution, but no injuries were reported in the grounding or the rescue, and most passengers were able to climb down to the waiting rescue boats on their own. Coast Guard ships first tried to tow the stranded vessel ashore, but were unsuccessful as the tow line snapped. The ship is operated by Florida-based Tradewinds Casino Cruise Lines, which had invited passengers to board the ship free of charge.
And staying in the U.S., the entertainment giant Time Warner has officially rejected a multi-billion-dollar offer from Rupert Murdoch to take over the company. How big was this deal?
If the merger had gone through, it would have combined the 2 of the largest players in the cable network business and solidify Murdoch's global media empire. But Time Warner CEO Jeff Brooks announced that the board voted to turn down the bid, saying it wasn't in the company's best interest. The offer, which was first reported by the New York Times, consisted of stock and cash valued at about $80 billion and was first made in June. Time Warner owns a range of media properties, including the Warner Brothers movie studio and cable channels such as HBO and CNN. The proposed takeover by the CEO of 21st Century Fox signals his plans to expand into new markets and billions of consumers.
Television content is becoming more valuable, and having good cable networks is becoming more valuable. Time Warner has very good TV content, biggest TV studio in Hollywood by some measures, and has some crown jewel cable networks, among other things.
Following the news of the failed takeover, Time Warner stock rose nearly 17% on the New York Stock Exchange. However, analysts say Murdoch will continue to make more attractive offers in his pursuit of Time Warner. Terry?
More attractive offers. We'll be watching this story as it develops. Thank you so much for those stories, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours. Now let's check on weather conditions with our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, so far this year's summer has been quite different compared to previous years. I would say drier.
That's right. Previously, we would get heavy downpours from mid-June through mid-July, but this year it's been pretty dry so far due to a lack of precipitation. However, some welcome news as monsoon rains have begun. At the moment, both Jeollado provinces are getting 30 millimeters per hour of heavy rainfall. The total amount of showers will differ depending on which region you're in. The western coastal regions are looking at over 100 millimeters, whereas us here in the central regions should get about 30 to 70, which should be just enough to appease the recent dryness. Now, this round of rainfall will gradually taper to an end by tomorrow evening, but keep in mind that some regions may continue to get heavy sporadic downpours accompanied by thunder and storm through Saturday. On to Friday's readings. Seoul and Gwangju hit 28, while Busan reached 26. On to other places. Jeju makes it to 28, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang to 26 and 30. That's all I have for you now, but I'll be back with more updates after 10.
All right, thanks, Bo-kyung, for that. And that wraps up this edition of ARIRANG News, and we'll be back at 10 p.m. Korea time.